So now we go on to the Second Amendment. Don't get nervous just because I said they're not listening to us. Now there's a picture of a gun. Not there yet. The Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now what part of that last sentence do they not understand? The right to keep and bear arms. Many liberals like to talk about the wording is simply for when you get to that comma. They don't read it that way. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The liberals like to interpret that as meaning, well, it means the states can raise a militia and make you join. I don't get that from that wording, and neither did the Founding Fathers. Where this right came from initially was, again, William and Mary's English Bill of Rights in 1689, granted only to Protestants the right to bear arms for their personal protection. If you were a Catholic in England, you were in deep stuff in 1689, because the Protestants were walking around with muskets and they were looking for trouble. In April 18th of 1775, a British detachment marches from Boston to Lexington and Concord to seize the citizens' arms there and arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock. Now they sent them there to arrest the individual citizens' arms. These were British citizens. These were Protestant British citizens that had a Bill of Rights that had been around for almost 100 years, saying that they had the right to hold that musket or that shotgun or that flintlock pistol. But this British detachment decided that enough had been enough. We're going to go take their guns. And we're going to arrest Samuel Adams and John Hancock because they were the biggest troublemakers in the whole continent. John Hancock was the wealthiest man in America due to his many smuggling ships. And Samuel Adams was dirt poor. Poorer than dirt. He was a horrible businessman. Couldn't do anything right except create a revolution. He was real good at that. So they wanted these two men very bad, and as part of it, they wanted to get those ammo stores. But it didn't work out so well for them because of Dr. Joseph Warren and his band of spies told Paul Revere, who set up some friends of his in the Old North Church, to look for these soldiers. And when those soldiers left the ships, him and 34 other men rode through the night to tell all the cities and all the towns around to get the Minutemen up, get them ready. And so when that detachment of soldiers, I think it was about 700 men, got to the bridge at Lexington, they were met by 70 or 80 Minutemen, literally Minutemen. They were ready to go at a minute's notice. These were commandos of their time, so to speak. There were militias everywhere. These men were the cream of the crop, so to speak. They had volunteered to do more and do all they could to be ready at a moment's notice. They'd been doing this since the French and Indian War, so it wasn't a new thing to them. They'd gotten very good at it. But the mistake they made was at the bridge at Lexington, Green. The British came in, formed up, and here's these 70 or 80 farmers, and there were 5 or 6 black men, free black men in there also. One of them actually died on that scene. So that's another little side thing to tell you. You want to say it was just a bunch of old white guys with slaves. There were a lot of free black men that served in the Revolution proudly. So here's this British regiment, 700 men lining up in formation on Lexington Green. This is the most powerful army the world had ever seen to date. 70 farmers with their muskets that they took down off their mantles and loaded up that morning to try to protect their own homes because they didn't know what they were there for. They had heard all kinds of rumors. They thought they were going to burn the cities down. They had no idea. Well, the captain running that detachment of Minutemen, he told them, hold your fire, hold your fire. Nobody knows what happened. Somebody fired. And when somebody fired, all the British fired. And 6 proud Minutemen lay dead on the green. And then the rest of them scattered. The captain of the guard said, you know, let's haul ass, guys. We're going to get killed here. So they took off. So the British soldiers kept going forward. Then where did they go? They went to Concord. But by the time they got there, the militia had really been alerted. And they fought back. They fought back hard. They stopped them. And the reason why they stopped them was this. They got to Concord and the militia had fled up into the woods because they had heard what was coming. They got to Concord. They found some arms, some individual arms, and some gunpowder, a small amount of the munitions that they had stored there. They put them in the town square and set them on fire. Well, the militiamen were just up the hill in the trees. They see the smoke billowing up from the town square and they shouted, "My God, they're burning our houses down." So what did they do? Pulled up their pants, they loaded their muskets, and attacked the most powerful army on the face of the earth. By the time they got back to Concord and started fighting with them, the British were ready to leave anyway. They started a brief skirmish and pushed them out of the town, and then the rest of the militia showed up. The Minutemen were the one that were supposed to get there first. But then the rest of the militia was awakened and were coming. So by the time they got back to the bridge to get away, there were 4,000 Americans waiting for them. They fought them, they got them, they pushed them back, and then the general in Boston had thought there would be trouble. He had sent a couple thousand more troops to come up behind, and they arrived there at the same time. But they turned and started running back to Boston when they saw what was facing them. Those 4,000 militiamen were met with some 4,000 or 5,000 more militiamen that were set up in the woods the entire way from Lexington to Boston. And they shot at those soldiers the whole way home, wiping out half of their detachment. Just think if we didn't have that right to bear arms. The British would have walked in, taken Samuel Adams, taken John Hancock, and hung them. And who knows what would have happened with the war. But because free men that were just simple farmers that had given themselves some training or got some training from a few soldiers stood up, they pushed them back. And the shot heard around the world started the war. Sorry, I went a little off track on there, but I really like that part of the revolution. Going on to the Pennsylvania Constitution of 1776, all the colonies that were now engaged in combat with England were making their own charters and their own constitutions because they saw themselves as individual nation states. The Constitution of 1776 of Pennsylvania asserted that the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state. Alexander Hamilton in 1788, one of his famous quotes were, "If circumstances should at any time oblige the government to form an army of any magnitude, that army can never be formidable to the liberties of the people, while there is a large body of citizens, little if at all, inferior to them in discipline and the use of arms, who stand ready to defend their own rights and those of their fellow citizens." Does that sound like he's talking about a militia? He's talking about you and me being able to keep the King of England out of our face. Or the King of Washington. The Bill of Rights were written to allay the fears of the states that the federal government would take over and run roughshod over their states. Again, they still saw themselves as nation states that were just working under an umbrella, almost like a treaty, together under the U.S. federal government. A well-regulated militia assured the states that the federal government would not force them to disband their militias under the new constitutional government. That's what the delegates were mainly fearful of. They wanted to be able to protect them. Pennsylvania wanted to be able to protect themselves from New Jersey and the federal government and France and Indians, and rightly so. The right of the people is another assurance to the states and the people that the federal government is